Well, I mean, I'm sure there's businesses out there where they valued it at a certain point. Maybe it's not valued as much. I mean, what would legally happen there? I mean, they have to buy them out at the higher price?
That can be the result.
Yeah, see, that's
well,
wild.
not necessarily the higher price. The better way to do it is to set up a formula in the document and talk about having a neutral third-party business valuation performed, and then make that work. But unfortunately, with a lot of these stock agreements that people get, they just $10 a point or $10 a share, or it's based on the revenue of this year times 3. But now maybe business takes off because Anthony gets out there and he's making it rain.
Crushing it.
Yeah, make it rain. Make it rain for my kids. Any other kind of, things to think about as you're adding more, family or partners to the mix, as far as, I don't know, accounting or, shares or distributions or sharing those profits that we need to keep in consideration?
Sure. Well, and that goes back to the governing documents and the taxability. So consulting with your advisors again, as you mentioned. But what we also start to see is in the employment law phase of this is if you bring on a partner, whether it's a family member or just a close friend, you're probably growing and you need to hire more employees. Where you're going to hire now? More of your family? More of your new partner's family? That adds a new dynamic. Are you going to bring in non-family members? And then how are you going to manage that culture where if it's a non-family member, whose side are they going to take? Which goes back to you need to communicate and keep the culture professional. There's an old saying I joke about with small businesses and medium-sized businesses, all businesses. So many people like to talk about this great culture where we're all family. Well, the challenge with that is with family, we make excuses, right? Well, that's not having a good day, or it's been a bad week. Well, if we weren't related, I'd hold you to that standard. I hope I'd hold you to that KPI. But now when you do have a closely held business and your employees are part of your family, you really can't say that we're not going to treat them as family. So you have this new dynamic that you need to consider for your culture.
Right.
Yeah, you don't really think about that.
No, you don't.
A lot of those soft skills that you don't really think about either, the communication side. I think that's a big part of it. Just having those conversations, as uncomfortable as they may be, about what needs to happen and why it needs to happen, can really avoid those hurdles later on.
Yeah, for sure. You're going through your business life and, you're adding employees or partners. There's different, life events that come into play. So marriage, divorce, how do some of those things affect, a business as far as a business owner perspective?
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to how are we treating people as family with excuses or not. But what we know is as mom or dad starts this business and they bring in the children, sometimes there's some romantic relationships that occur between employees, whether you're family or not. And there's employment considerations for that, to how to handle that from an HR perspective. Well, when it's family now, how are you going to handle this to make sure that any personal issue doesn't cause a business problem during the day? And if any business challenges are being faced, how does that affect your Thanksgiving dinner when everybody's together?
Right.
So it goes
Not
back.
Not passing the mashed potatoes,
right.
That's for sure.
It can be challenging, and we see that a lot. And I mention these not because it's just, this happens all the time. Yes, it happens all the time, but these are the seeds of what really, when they start, this is what grows and develops and evolves into the greater problem of management of the business, and which could lead to the business dispute, internal partnership dispute, or employment, because you can still have a family member allege harassment, discrimination, retaliation against the company. Hopefully the business has EPLI, which is insurance for employment practices. But in any event, it goes back to the communication And now as you have these family members coming in, again, clear roles and responsibilities and who's going to make what decisions. And it's never good to have any romantic relationship where one person is the supervisor of the other. It's never a good setting with family or without family. But
Yeah, I think the take from every point so far is communication is key.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
Right.
If we were to call this episode anything, I think communication is key would be the primary
Right.
title.
We've talked about like partners and families and hiring, promotions, titles. I think that all probably comes into play as far as, making sure that, everyone's treated fairly, I guess is the best way to put that, right? Yeah. What about succession planning right now with our business? My dad and I are the two partners. My brother joined us, 8 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
So I've been working with my dad almost 20 years. But I'm sure at some point, making my brother a partner or the succession planning as my dad possibly gets out of the business. But in other businesses, how does that work? Or what's the best way to approach that?
it is a challenge for any business, but especially when you add family and different generations of family, because you have different phases in life, right? Whether you're just starting off and you have young children or older children, you're planning to go to college, because that starts to impact the profitability, right? And now you start having arguments about who's contributing more and who deserves more of a share of the profits. So going back to your comment, it's communicating, but then documenting all of these things. And I think that's what's very important, is somebody still needs to be in charge. Somebody has to have the final vote. So we could communicate about how this is going to operate, the succession planning, the buy-in, because we're still talking about a business, right?
Right.
This is wealth, this is assets. So what I usually see is, if you're a functional family, which is rare, right? Because we're all families. but if you can talk about these things, it's great. Other times there are consultants that companies could bring in and say, just walk me through the process, and let's try to keep the personal feelings out of it. Again, whether it's family or a non-family business, everybody with a seat at the table has a different interest. And what's best is, in my opinion, is to always focus on what's best for the company, and then figure out what's the fairness, to your word before, in handling this. But it goes back to, a lot of people start businesses with the idea of just wanting to be on their own or to pay their mortgage. But what's your next step? And it can go back to vision, right? What is the future of this business? Do we want to grow and scale it? Do we want it to be family? Do we want it to be every member of the family? Because I have seen some other family businesses where they said, there's 3 children, but only one of you really cares so much about it.